In 1 Kings chapter 18, Elijah stands on the top of Mount Carmel and calls fire down from heaven. It's a very dramatic moment in the Bible. God moves undeniably. And a lot of people would think for Elijah, this is a peak spiritual moment. And then in chapter 19, almost immediately, everything shifts. Jezebel threatens his life, and then Elijah runs. Not only does he run, but he collapses internally. He isolates himself, and he asks God to take his life. A prophet of the Lord is suicidal. And when God asks him a question, "What are you doing here?" he answers twice with the same answer. "I am very zealous, and I alone am left." And that's where we need to slow down. Because when you hold that up to what we already know about the story, something doesn't line up. In the previous chapter, a guy named Obadiah tells Elijah that 700 prophets have been hidden and protected. And later on in chapter 19, God himself says that 7,000 in Israel have not bowed down to Baal. So Elijah says, "I'm the only one left." But that's not true. And the first instinct, if we're not careful, is to turn that into a character judgment. To say Elijah's wrong, Elijah's being dramatic, Elijah is ignoring reality. And maybe even Elijah is slipping. And that's why God is transitioning away from him. Because that's what I did. That's a clean interpretation, but it's also incomplete. Let's not rush past the tension in the text. Elijah has evidence of God's power, awareness of other prophets, and a recent victory that should reinforce his confidence. And yet he still says, "I alone am left." So what do we do with that? There are two broad ways to interpret it. Option one, Elijah knew the truth and rejected it. Or option two, Elijah had access to truth, but was no longer able to operate from it. That distinction is everything. Because one is about character failure, and the other is about human limitation under pressure. So let's deal with what Obadiah said directly. Yes, Elijah was told that prophets were being hidden. So we can say confidently, he was exposed to information that contradicted his belief. But here's the question. Did that information become something he could rely on internally when pressure hit? Because knowing something and using it are not the same thing. You can know you're supported. You can know you're capable. You can know that you've seen God come through before and still feel completely alone in the moment. So instead of saying Elijah ignored the truth, a more accurate way to say it is Elijah's internal state prevented him from operating from what he knew. That's not denial, that's distortion under pressure. So let's pay attention to something. God asked Elijah the same question twice, and Elijah gave the exact same answer both times. That repetition is the thing that matters, because he's not processing anything new. He's not adjusting, he's not integrating, he's not reinforcing, he's rehearsing a narrative. I'm alone, I've done everything right, no one else is left. That's not just a statement, that's a belief loop. So this is where we can introduce something important. There are moments where people are not describing reality. They're describing a version of reality that their emotional state is allowing them to see. What changed from chapter 18 to chapter 19? It wasn't God. It wasn't the truth. It was Elijah's state. He goes from bold, decisive, clear, to afraid, isolated, exhausted. So when his state changes, something subtle but very powerful happens. The way he weighs information changes. The threat from Jezebel becomes dominant, the memory of God's power becomes less influential, and the knowledge of other prophets becomes irrelevant to how he feels. So now when he speaks, he's not lying. He's speaking from what he feels most real. And what he feels most real is, I'm alone. So let's name what's happening without attacking Elijah. There are clear distortions in his thinking. Catastrophizing. I'm the only one left. Isolation bias. Overestimating how alone he is. Emotional reasoning. I feel alone, therefore I am alone. Cognitive narrowing. Only seeing his situation, not the broader reality. But here's where we need to be careful. We don't turn those distortions into a condemnation of his character, because the text doesn't do that. God never says, you're wrong, Elijah. Why didn't you listen? Get yourself together. Instead, God responds in a completely different way. So let's look at the order of God's response. Elijah sleeps, he eats, he rests again. God reveals himself, not in the fire this time, but gently. Then God speaks truth. Then God gives instruction. The order is intentional. God doesn't correct Elijah first. He stabilizes him first. Why though? Because Elijah's issue isn't just what he believes. It's what he currently has the capacity to process. I'll say it again. It's what he currently has the capacity to process. And this is where we need to slow down and really understand what's happening. God addresses Elijah's condition before addressing his cognition. Because it means there are moments where truth alone is not enough if the person doesn't have the capacity to receive and operate from it. So here's the conclusion that I made. God tells Elijah to anoint Elisha because Elijah lost it. But the Bible never says that. Elijah continues to function as a prophet after this moment. He's not rebuked harshly. He's not removed in disgrace. So instead of saying Elijah failed, so God replaced him, it's probably more accurate to read it or understand it like this. God expanded the mission and initiated succession while Elijah was still active. That's not a punishment. That's continuity. I'm not saying that's the perfect end all be all to how to interpret this story. I'm just saying that's what I have come to understand about it as I've continued to study it. If we take a step back, this story is not just about Elijah. It's about how people function under pressure. It shows us that you can have real experiences with God. You can have accurate information. You can have evidence of truth and still not be able to operate from it in certain moments. That doesn't mean you're fake. It doesn't mean you're disqualified. It means your internal state is influencing your ability to access reality. So here's a grounded way to understand what's happening. Elijah had access to information that contradicted his belief that he was alone. But under emotional strain, he operated from his internal narrative rather than information. His perception was shaped more by fear and exhaustion than by a previous known reality. That's not rebellion. That's not ignorance. That's a capacity issue under pressure. This shows up in a lot of places. People know they're supported. People know what's true. People know what they've experienced. But in certain states, they speak in absolutes, feel isolated, make decisions that don't match reality. So the problem isn't always they don't know better. Sometimes the problem is they can't access better right now. And sometimes we misdiagnose that. And when we do, you respond incorrectly. Elijah's story challenges quick characterizations, and it forces us to wrestle with something deeper. You can be faithful, you can be experienced, you can be chosen, and still have moments where your perception is off. Not because you rejected the truth, but because your state made truth harder to reach. And instead of discarding Elijah in that moment, God meets him in it, restores him through it, and continues his work with him. That's not just theology. That's a model for helping us understand people. And if you miss that, you'll keep correcting people at the level of information when the real issue is their capacity to operate from it. So these are just some thoughts and some ideas that I was going through when I am reading through, the Bible, and I got to this story and I was challenged with, this is what happened and this is what happened to you and how are you responding this way and why did you do this and get that guy out of here. Because the reality is sometimes I could do that. Sometime in the future, I could do that. I know things and I'm very aware of them, but in the moment, it's hard to access what it is that I know. It's hard to operate from what I know. And if I could do it, then other people could do it too. So it helps me reading the story because then I'm able to operate with other people and engage with other people and extend more grace and extend patience, or allow God to help me extend that grace and patience in other areas or in certain situations. Because God is the one that knows it all. I just know a part of it. And I want to be able to, again, engage with people where I'm extending to them the things that God would extend to them. So I hope this was helpful. So if you want to keep hearing me go through some things that I'm learning, if you like the things that you're seeing on the channel, then subscribe, then like, and then share. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.